Hey y'all, and welcome back to the Rhythm Section, brought to you by The Mind Refiner. I'm your host, Corbin Blair. This week, Kyle and I are talking about Ghetts' major label album, Conflict of Interest, and Drake's latest offering, Scary Hours 2 EP, as fans await his 6th studio album. We'll offer our patented COG ratings, discuss how we felt about these projects, and what's next for these artists. Hope you enjoy. And if you like what you hear, remember to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Let's get into the show. All right, I'm back with my co-host, the man on the mission, Kyle Bodanis. How are you doing today, Kyle?
It's good. It appears to be spring out, although it is cold. We are trending in the right direction. I'm getting a little bit more optimistic about things. I'm feeling good generally.
That's great. It's great to hear. Today we're going to be talking about some new Drake, and we're going to get into a little bit of Ghetts. Yeah, so I guess we'll roll right in and start talking about Scary Hours 2, Drake's second EP in the Scary Hours series. It's been about 3 years since Drake's last Scary Hours in January 2018. So a lot has changed since then. We've gone through a life-changing global pandemic. We're still in the midst of that. He's put out 3 albums in that space. And on the first Scary Hours, he had God's Plan and Diplomatic Immunity. So how do you think that compares to what we just got from Drake?
Yeah, I mean, like the latest Drake projects, I mean, you know, I don't really think they rank just in terms of his, you know, discography. Because, I mean, I think the problem with it is that, like, a lot of these projects lack focus, I feel like, and I'm kind of looking at you there, Scorpion, in terms of just like it's just a bunch of songs, and there's some good stuff in there too. Like Nonstop is one of my favorite Drake tracks. It's fucking awesome, but it's just like the whole album in general is kind of loose and not tight, and I don't think it's like worthy of the previous releases that he's put out, like Take Care, you know, like If You're Reading This kind of thing, even Views. I mean, like Dark Lane demo tape like has Chicago Freestyle and Losses on it. There's some really good stuff, but I mean, I guess my problem is that, and I would take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, because like I like the rap incarnation of Drake. So when it's leaning more on the R&B side, I'm not as like game with it. So for people who are the opposite of that, obviously they would, you know, disagree. But I mean, I think that we are yearning for another great Drake album, but this Scary Hours 2 coming out, I believe is kind of like a little bit of a nibble, a little bit of an appetizer for that whole situation.
Yeah, I think him kind of dropping this EP post, you know, the date for CLB, which is, you know, his long-awaited 6th studio album. He's kind of testing the waters again, and I feel like that is what Dark Lane demo tapes was kind of about. He had these songs that were floating around for a while. They started leaking on the internet. He knew that there wasn't really much to do with them. So he kind of put it out there, you know, gave us the TikTok viral single Tootsie Slide, which, you know, I think some people might call Drake's kind of most obvious attempt at relevance, because he's been so omnipresent in music for so long. And this was the first time, I think, where I would say it's a little bit of a misstep, and it was a single that was really geared towards virality and, you know, making its mark on TikTok. So I think seeing someone of Drake's stature and Drake's kind of just the way that he's been crafting his career and his sound, you know, I think people have always kind of come to him. And this is, I think Tootsie Slide was a moment of him trying to go and see what his impact was on the culture. What about you? What do you think of Dark Lane demo tapes and Tootsie Slide?
Like Tootsie Slide, like he doesn't have to force it. You know what I mean? Like he already works, and even though I just said that I'm not a big fan of R&B Drake, that isn't like an indictment of the quality of the music. It's more like just what my preference is for what he does. But like Dark Lane demo tapes, there's some really, really good tracks on it. But Tootsie Slide is him forcing it rather than just doing what he does. Like, he already works in a space that is friendly for popular music. You know what I mean? So, like, he doesn't have to do that. And when he does that, that is, like, the first step in the, on the trail to irrelevance. And I was, like, sad to see it, because, like, there is some, like, his body of works goes without saying, is fantastic and expansive. I mean, like, what were your thoughts on, like Scorpion Care Package, Dark Lane demo tapes, that run of albums? Like, how do you rank that in terms of his career?
So I think in those 3 albums, I think Scorpion was a major misstep for me. It has some good songs on it, but I think with Drake, we always know we're going to get something that we like. I think any style of Drake fan can say that. If you are a fan of his more R&B stuff, there'll always be something for you. If you're a fan of his hip hop stuff, he'll kind of always have something for you. If you like his more club anthem type stuff, he's gonna include something on there. So I think what a lot of Drake fans have been kind of asking for a long time is a more condensed version of Drake. I think he really hit the mark on Nothing Was the Same. 14 tracks was perfect. Even if you're reading this, it's too late, nice and short and concise. And I think that that's something that Drake has kind of always been a bit of a blind spot for him, is sometimes he just gives you too much music, and he's always, has access to kind of give that to you. He doesn't really, take long breaks. I think he's given us almost like a tape, a project, or at least like a hit record every year since like 2009, since he kind of emerged. So I think if you look at Care Package and just taking it for the songs that are on Care Package, it's probably Drake's best album, and unfairly so, because it's just a collection of his best Lucy's and some of his best work. I think him putting it out that summer, that he put it out in 2019, I believe it was, it just kind of gave him, he entered on the Billboard charts again. All those songs charted. For a lot of people, they're always asking for songs to be on DSPs these days, because that's where they're doing most of their music consumption. For me, I love maintaining my personal library and having songs as close to physical or as close to tangible as I can. So I've had all those songs for a long time, but I do understand like the validity of being able to go and play the motion whenever you want on iTunes, on Apple Music or Spotify or wherever you get your music from. So I think that 3 album run between Scorpion and Dark Lane demo tapes, it was kind of Drake, taking a little bit of a break, but without taking a break. So, and I think that is something that he's been very good at.
It makes me wonder, because the interesting point is, what does Drake's career look like not in a DSP era? You know what I mean? Like, because you're going to naturally release less music as a result of that. You know what I mean? So, like, an album like Scorpion, I think if you take the 14 songs off it, and the best, whether it's a mixture of styles or whatever, there is a very, very strong album in there. And I'm wondering if...
I think there's been... I think you could say that for a couple Drake albums. Like, I'm a big fan of Take Care, but I think you could have shaven Take Care down to a better album in less songs.
I agree with that, too. Like, Take Care, I think, is measured by its influence, but Nothing Was the Same, I think, is the tightest one. Like, from like a studio point of view. And then also if you're reading this too, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, I think those are the tightest ones, but I don't think they have the same impact. But I don't think the impact necessarily denotes quality. It denotes the right sound at the right time, if that makes sense.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think, like you're saying, like, if you shave Scorpion down, I think there's a really, really good album in there. I really do think the whole Pusha T diss records that came out before it really shifted the sound of the album in the same way that the ghostwriting allegations shifted views. And so I think those are 2 times in Drake's career where he's been kind of a little bit off his mark and making music not from the greatest place, or, doing these like thinly veiled responses to criticisms, talking about his son, which he wanted to have a coming out for, and that was kind of messed up by the Pusha T stuff. So I don't think he's making his best music when he's kind of, off his mark there. I think he obviously is one of the most talented people making the genres of music that he does. So he's always going to kind of have a high bar. But I think people are still kind of looking for something that I don't know if he will give them. And I think people want like an undisputed classic from Drake. And I think he's kind of given us, I would say he maybe has 2 or 3 classic albums by now. And that
And
is
how
definitely
many
up for
more?
debate.
How many more can you have? Like if you're looking at it, right? Like if you're really looking at it. I want to get back to that point though that you were saying just about when he is reacting to things like ghostwriting allegations, the whole Pusha T thing. I mean, some artists are okay working in that space, reacting. You know what I mean? Like someone like Eminem can react. I think this is the problem, why his overall music isn't strong, because the strong artists take the initiative and have a musical narrative that they craft and that they want to do. And as soon as you're trying to play someone else's game or follow someone else's narrative, you're not going to be making the music that is true to you, that is, that makes the most sense for what you're kind of do. And I think if you look at his albums and the way they've come out, he's followed his own initiative. And I think it's a matter of, listen, first of all, ghostwriting allegations, whatever, that like it happens in hip hop. But like he doesn't have to deal. I mean, the Pusha T thing was a big thing because like the whole thing, like this guy's got a son and all this kind of stuff. That's a whatever. But like beyond that, he doesn't have to. Like he doesn't need to involve himself in other people's narratives. He needs to do him. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point, and it kind of leads us to the next point I want to start talking about. So Drake announces back in December of 2020 that he's going to be dropping Certified Lover Boy, his 6th album, in January. We get a great trailer from him in the vein of a Jay-Z commercial from, I think, the Rhapsody era. And so the album still hasn't come out. It is now March of 2021. Do you think that it matters when an artist of Drake's stature announces something and doesn't deliver on it? Or do you think that because of all his bodies of work that he can get away with that?
I mean, the pressure comes from the fans, I think, and the idea of expectation. I mean, the issue is when you like when an album is hyped or it takes a long time to make and you're talking about it and you're like, hey, we're dropping it, and it gets pushed back and pushed back and it gets pushed back. Like there's a point where it's no longer anticipation. Right now, you are allowing people's expectations to completely manifest what the narrative this album dropping is. So if you don't meet those expectations, people are like, why did this piece of shit take so long? You know, and that's, I feel like, for any artist too. Like, imagine if Dre just dropped Detox. That is obviously the extreme example of it. But people would be like, if this is garbaggio, then I don't know what I'm going to do about it. And I think that he has put out so much music now that it doesn't matter in a like overall sense, but I think it might be him who needs to manage these expectations more. You know what I mean? So don't talk about Certified Lover Boy coming out and out and out if it's going to keep getting pushed back, because then people start thinking, well, why is it being pushed back? Like, why is this taking so long? All this kind of stuff. When something like Scary Hours 2, he just drops and immediately people are like, this is great. You know what I mean? No expectation. He just hits you with it hard.
I'm wondering too if leaks have played a role in Drake pushing Certified Lover Boy back, because I know for What's Next, I know that song, I heard it, I think, a week ahead of its release, and it was probably floating around a little bit longer than that. Like, I'm not usually one to dive into all the leaks, but someone had sent me that one. So I'm wondering, like, the leak culture, I think, kind of hasn't really existed in the same way that it used to, now that DSPs have kind of gone and evolved, and you're kind of skipping a step usually, where songs leak when you're sending it to a bunch of people or whatever. So I think it's like kind of going distributor straight to the DSPs for the most time. And I think that's how like we're getting a lot of surprise albums. But I think, I guess, big artists are still seeing, some manner of leaks. I know like there's been Kanye leaks in the past. Do you think leaks hinder albums and hurt albums in this day and age?
I think they've always hurt albums to an extent, because again, it takes away from the artist's initiative of the release. I mean, but then again, some leaks have been used to kind of by the artist as well. There is that variable that's put in. But like overall, I think, yeah, because like at the end of the day, you want to tease and promote and market as you wish along your timelines. And when someone takes that away from you, also, like, what is being leaked? Is it of a proper quality? Is it finished? Like, there's also that to be thrown in there. I think it's better, especially with these surprise albums. If you get the leak, it kind of takes away from the, you know, the really cool surprise element of it. So, like, I'm anti-leak. I'm not happy that leaks happen. I also think, like, that's been part of the problem with one of the many problems labels have in the digital music space. Because, you know, like, even going back to Metallica back in the day, you know, when I Disappear leaked, it's like, I don't understand why Lars Ulrich is a piece of shit who isn't forward thinking, but him being like, yo, they leaked a song that we wanted to release, that I can sympathize with.
Yeah, I think leaks are something that like can be a problem, and they can also build hype. I prefer like 100%. Song snippets leaking. I think that is a great tactic that artists use.
And that's an example of it working for the artist's narrative, right? Like, I got like 30 seconds of that and I want a little bit more of that.
So I can't wait till it comes out.
Yeah, and I think that, like, you know, for certain records, like I remember hearing the leaks before the records. Like I remember some Yeezus leaks, and then, you know, it built up a lot of anticipation for hearing Yeezus. And then sometimes they have the opposite effect where the leaked record sounds a lot better than what you finally get when you get the studio version.
Yeezus is a good example of, like, that is the perfect bits to release, because it's such a departure from the other sound. So when you hear a bit of it, like I heard little bits of like Black Skinhead and stuff like that ahead of that release, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? This doesn't sound like a Kanye West album. And then you get and then you're like, oh, then, you know, you're itching for it at that point.
So on this new Drake album, CLB, what kind of sounds are you looking for? Like what's left for Drake? Is there any territory that he needs to cover? Is there things that need to be addressed, or is he kind of playing par for the course at this point?
I'm hoping he's going to avoid playing par for the course, because that's how you become kind of stagnant. So I think, again, these songs that release on Scary Hours 2, this is what I'm looking for from Drake. Like, is that hip hop, you know, deep bass thumping. You can hear it in a club, you can hear it in a car rolling down the street. And that's kind of what I'm looking for from a sonic standpoint. That's where I think Drake's music is really the coolest, is where he's playing, you know, his voice is being put over, like, you know, the trap influence beats that he uses and the heavy bass and this kind of stuff. And I think that it just works for him so much. That's why a song like Nonstop is fucking sick, because it's not like he's going in there and cutting super fast or anything like that. It's just there is a flow and a style and a coolness that he exudes in the rap space. And when people are kind of like, well, he's not like Ghostface Killah or whatever like that, I'm like, well, then you're not kind of getting what the point is, because it is about flow, and it is about the way the song moves in and out and like head bobbing and that kind of stuff. And that's what I want to hear from Drake. That's what I want him to attack, because I think he's got to put out, I think he works high at his highest level when he's putting out great hip hop. And I would really love to see that more. I think I'm biased towards that sound, because the charts would disagree with that being his highest working mechanism. But that's what I'm personally looking for from a Drake album.
So on Dark Lane demo tapes, we got the track War, we got Demons featuring Fivo Foreign and Sosa Geek, and then we got the Only You freestyle last year with Heady One on Heady One's album. So we're seeing Drake play in the UK/New York drill kind of space. Do you think we'll hear some more of this sound on the album?
I hope so, and that kind of just triggered in my head. I mean, yeah, I don't think American style hip hop is his, and the way it manifests itself is his future in terms of what would be the most interesting. I would love to see him get more into that, because I think the way either side of the Atlantic looks at hip hop is completely different, and I think a lot of it actually matches more a little bit towards what he wants to do and like what his influences are, because like he's not Jamaican, but he just comes from a city that is listen, if you're from Toronto, whether you're a cook or a rapper, the Jamaican influence is there. There's nothing, you can't avoid it. It's inevitable. So like I would love him to work more in that space.
I think Drake's kind of always at his best when he is playing with new styles and doing new things, like, from, using UK funky to bringing Afrobeat fusion or Caribbean fusion forward. So I think that Drake has always kind of been ahead of the trend, and globally speaking, he's had a really forward ear, which, obviously leads to accusations of culture vulture or whatever other things people want to kind of throw at him, for kind of being ahead of the curve or for shining the light on, certain scenes or certain sounds. So I think that alone, outside of all of Drake's other skills and accomplishments, has kind of kept him at the forefront of music and rap, because he's kind of, always been able to shift and be ahead of the sound. And, we very often see his peers and other people in the industry kind of following his trends that he, sets and leads. So I'm really interested to see where he goes on the sixth album. It's an undisputed run at this point, countless awards, countless Billboard breaking, chart topping singles or whatever. So I'm interested to see kind of where he'll go from here. Do you think we'll see any of the songs on Scary Hours 2 on the album? I'm thinking What's Next might get a placement on the album as well.
Yeah, I think so too. And I was also thinking about the Lil Baby, what is it, Wants and Needs.
Yeah,
that one as well, just because that's kind of like a high profile, feature. Not that Rick Ross isn't, but I mean, I think it gets obligatory at this point. We're talking obligatory Rick Ross. So like, I think so.
Yeah, I feel like with the Rick Ross too, it's kind of like a really cute verse. He gave him like a 16-bar verse before like Drake, demolishes the rest of the song for 5 minutes of straight rapping. So
which
I thought
is
that
fantastic.
Was
which is great, by the way.
Yeah, which is like probably one of my favorite styles of Drake, or my favorite style of Drake, when he just kind of gives you unabridged rapping, narrative thought, just like flows and bars and intricacies.
Yeah, I think you're going to see some of this stuff turn up on it. Like, I will put it this way, it's not a bad idea. They're all good tracks.
So how would you rate Scary Hours on the COG scale?
Honestly, I'm giving it full marks. I'm like a 9 out of 10 almost, like 9 cogs out of 10. I really enjoyed this. I know what was really cool about this, and I think our good friend Eric, is it Zaworski?
It is Zaworski.
Yeah, sorry, I worry about mispronouncing names. Eric Zaworski, very knowledgeable individual. I mean, I think it was either you or him was talking about how it's cool when something comes out and everybody is listening to it and is kind of like enjoying it communally, right? I think we're missing a little bit of that. It's playing at a club or a bar or something like that, just because of the global pandemic. But this idea that something comes out that gets everyone excited is really cool. And a lot of people were excited about this coming out, and I was excited. So I'm giving this a 9 out of 10. The only reason I'm not giving it a 10 out of 10 is because I want more of it. Give me more than 3 tracks, because you were 3 for 3. You were good.
Yeah, I think I'm going to join you on that 9 out of 10 cogs. I would also say that is a really interesting point, and there's very few artists who can kind of move the needle like that when they put out a release. And, Kanye obviously was up there at one point, and I think based on his last few releases, he's kind of taken himself out of that conversation. So it'll be interesting to see what artists, can kind of make the world pause and be like, hey, we got to pay attention to this. Let's all talk about this one thing. And, it takes a certain stature of superstar to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. I hope more of this is happening, because it's really, really fantastic. And it kind of reminded me of if you're reading this when it came out, because that summer, those songs were fucking playing everywhere. I went to a friend's birthday party at a nightclub, and I'm like, the DJ dropped like 4 tracks over the course of the night, and they were just fucking fantastic. They were bangers. Everyone was on the floor, and I like that. I love what a good release from Drake also does for the city, for Toronto, and just how hyped everyone fucking gets. So I'm hoping it's coming again.
So we're going to shift our perspective across the pond, and we're going to be talking about Ghetts. The East London stalwart delivers his 3rd studio album, Conflict of Interest. So Ghetts has been around in the UK scene for a long time, a close friend and collaborator of Kano, kind of from the same group, both in the Nasty Crew. And he's given us a run of mixtapes from the early and mid 2000s till now. So he's joined Warner to deliver this album. It's, I think, fantastic. What did you think about Conflict of Interest?
It's funny because it went over my head, and like in terms of I didn't know to like really pay attention to its release. And I also believe that I'm still beginning my journey into the UK hip hop, and it was something that I only for the last couple of years I've been really, really into, not because of a lack of skill or whatever. It's more because I just wasn't paying attention. And you were like, yo, you got to check this out. And it's from beginning to end fucking good. I'm not skipping any tracks on it. It was really, really awesome. There is heavyweights on this album from just the last 20 years of, UK hip hop. Features, as I said, features are incredible. His lyrics and just the way he talks about taking the next step in his life, and like the beauty of being a black person, and just like his pride with that, and wanting to create a situation where his family moving forward is in a better situation, whereas people are moving forward in a situation, and like with it you feel the Council Estate London situation, as well as the idea that you can escape it and get above it if there is focus. And I really love that, and I just thought this album was good, and I just found myself listening to it all the way through, skipping around. I really think this is something I'm going to be listening to for a while. I really enjoy it. And then also like the Pas Salut, like, because obviously we've kind of been like paying attention to Pas Salut as he's been broke into the scene here, and just seeing him on that was really great too. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, I think I agree with all that you said there. Like having Pas Salut featured, he really found, I think, the perfect balance of features on this album. We have a lot of big name heavyweight artists here. We have Skepta, we have Stormzy, we have Ed Sheeran, we have Giggs, Dave, Wretch, like a lot of artists that kind of from the scene. He's also has some R&B features, but it also does not feel bogged down by features.
No, he has very much of his own voice in it.
Yeah, like it wasn't like an album where I'm like, oh, like another feature, another feature, another feature. Everything feels very interwoven, and like it fits quite close together. What do you think? What was your favorite feature on this, or favorite
feature was probably toss up between. I mean, like, I'm always down for some Skepta. IC3 was a great track, and I feel like we're again for UK hip hop, it's obligatory Skepta now. He's like the Rick Ross. Maybe more prolific in relative to the scene. I really like Skangman with fucking Stormzy and No Mercy, the Pas Salut feature. I probably No Mercy. I just think that Pas Salut is such a rising star, and I'm loving that he's coming in on this. But I feel like Stormzy was my in entrance
he's
into
kind of
UK
like
hip hop.
He's kind of like an introduction for you, right?
Yeah, Heavy as the Head. That album really kind of like, I had listened to stuff like Roots Manuva and like that kind of shit, and I was into that. But that Heavy as the Head album, I think what it was is that like my brain and my listening taste weren't like acclimatized to grime. Sorry, so like, when I listened to earlier Stormzy albums, I wasn't quite getting it, but then when I listened to that, because it's a little bit more American hip hop influenced with, I mean, the UK way of, it was just rooted in hip hop rather than like the more electronic elements of grime. So that was the gateway drug for me to get into this. And it was cool to see him come up. Also, I mean, a big reason I got into it because Stormzy's a Manchester United fan. If he's an Arsenal fan, I don't even think we would have this conversation this day. Who knows? So yeah, I mean, like these were really, really good. Probably No Mercy and Skangman were my favorites.
Yeah, I thought the IC3, I think, was definitely one of my favorites on here. I really enjoyed Dave and Hamza and Wretch on Little Bo Peep at the end to round it off. I think this album was just overall very, very strong. And I'm enjoying the kind of perspective, like you were talking about earlier. We're getting an interesting perspective from Ghetts and from, his kind of class of age rappers, right? Where they're kind of reflecting on their lives. They've had a lot of success. They've kind of been there and done that and are kind of taking a look back and, giving us some wisdom, reflecting on things that went well, things that didn't go well. And it really comes across on this album, songs like Autobiography, where he has a nice
Autobiography is like
to start the song off.
Autobiography is one of my favorite songs of the whole album. It's absolutely
I think like for me, I think that between that and Hop Out were kind of my favorite songs on this project. I thought Hop Out was really fantastic because it really feels like a West Coast G-Funk song, and it feels really interesting hearing UK music on that West Coast G-Funk sound.
Because the dovetail kind of makes sense just from like entomology or taxonomy, whatever the fuck you want to call it, just because of like grime and the electronic influences that come in from that. So like G-Funk also, like compared to the rest of the hip hop on say like the East Coast or whatever like that during its infancy, was more rooted in like Africa Bambaataa and those like electronic sounds. So like it completely makes sense that those work together. I was actually surprised just like at the like listening to Rebel with a Cause, like his first album, just the difference in sound, like because that is more like for me rooted in grime and like elements of industrial and stuff like that, and this is more or less straight up hip hop album. I'm kind of wondering why is that it for that development, you know what I mean? Is that, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's kind of shifting a little bit, like in terms of genre. So I think, these people are foundational to grime and to the sound coming out of East London. So I think kind of being able to have that perspective of having done that music really well and built that sound, it gives you a bit more room to kind of be like, okay, well, now I know how to, do that sound really comfortably well. Now I'm going to branch out a little bit. Obviously, they have their influences of what music that they grew up on, what American music they grew up on, what British music they grew up on, also, working with their contemporaries in the scene and what sounds they're playing with. So I think you get to kind of deliver a more complex and well-rounded album after having that kind of lived experience of doing, being foundational to the genre and then moving past it. And then, you can kind of come on an album at this point, like kind of like Stormzy does, like Kano does, like a lot of these artists that are his peers do, and give you songs that are straight grime tracks. And that's for the, the day one fans. You can play in the hip hop. You can play a little bit of UK drill if you want. You can kind of dance between genres, and it's respected now because you have already done everything that there is to do within, your one genre or your one introductory style. So I think it works better for an elder artist rather than, a younger artist starting out, because I think people kind of have a problem when younger artists bounce around on sounds too much, because, if you're not familiar with that artist, it's hard to get a sense of who they are, what their real sound is. And sometimes that's the way an artist finds their sound. But I think sometimes fans, or even if at that point they aren't fans, kind of have a hard time following at that point.
It's interesting because I feel like if you're a new artist, like there is an influence that genre, like people who are fans of genre have, like especially like in internet spaces, you know what I mean, because they'll try to perpetuate that genre and push it out because they enjoy it. But as you, like you said, as you get older, it becomes like there's a tyranny of genre where there's an expectation that your thing has to sound like this, and crossing over into a mainstream situation is the hardest, or more of a mainstream sound, if you will, that kind of aligns with what the larger community is listening to. So I mean, I like that they're doing this, like someone like Stormzy and him are do that, because they can really get to a point where they can do anything, right? And you know, and it's interesting the subject matter that's chosen in this, because I think if you're going to look, like, let's look at like Jay-Z, like 444 is about, like, obviously there's the interpersonal stuff with him and Beyonce, but a lot of that is a lot like, this is what I've learned, and it's not about the streets anymore, and it's not about, you know, these stupid clashes of our youth, because that was us being in a system that, you know, was killing us, and now this is how we elevate. And that idea of elevation is very much in this as well. And I like that they're exploring that, and I like that. I think that's what an elder statesman does in hip hop. You know what I mean? Like, especially, you know, given the circumstances that a lot of rappers come from, you know, from the inner city, and like, and it being, you know, the way a lot of what goes on in the inner city is expressed, you know, to a larger audience. And I love that that's what he's doing with this. But then there's also this idea of like self-liberation and like how he feels about himself, and that's reflected in there. There's almost like there's a mental health edge to it as well, which I thought was really cool.
No, yeah, I think the mental health and him framing everything is really, it really works, and it really bleeds through, you know, even on songs that it kind of doesn't really touch on it, because it kind of soaks up the whole album and kind of envelops the whole thing. So I think all the kind of different elements that Ghetts is talking about here really work well in conjunction with each other, even if they're not kind of highlighted on every single song. So I think like lately we've seen like an explosion, obviously, with the UK drill scene. We're seeing artists like Heady One and Frosty kind of, you know, start to make some crossovers. We have like people like Unknown T. The genre's kind of been parodied a little bit. It's reached New York, you know, by way of Chicago to London, with a little bit of Toronto involvement in there. And we're seeing the genre kind of explode. Do you think this will be the year that UK drill ends up in pop in some ways?
Yeah, I think it's too, it's too like good. You know what I mean? Like, I think at the end of the day, any genre that begins pushing and creating stars like Skepta, you know, like Kano, is going to find its way into the mainstream inevitably. In artists like Drake, you know what I mean? Like, we were just mentioning how he's got an ear for that kind of thing, and artists like him will always want to incorporate those elements in what they're doing. I'm surprised more rappers haven't, especially North American rappers, haven't like kind of grabbed a hold of it. But I definitely think, I mean, like in the UK for sure, because I think the UK is probably a little bit more open from a listening standpoint, especially for newer artists. Because, I mean, if you look at the history of music, the UK is always, whether it's like blues influenced rock music in the 60s, punk, that kind of thing, they're always, you know, new wave, they're always kind of there. You know what I mean? They're always kind of, the journalists are always looking for it. Now they'll be the first to savage those people afterwards, but I think, you know, even like fucking grunge, as a British journalist comes and listens to it and then comes back, and then all of a sudden the bands are starting to be more, you know, heavier guitar driven and that kind of thing. So I think in England it's definitely 100% an inevitability. In terms of the global, well, not even the global, because I feel like other countries have also really grabbed onto this. But in North America, I don't know. Like I still don't think they officially get it yet, if that makes sense.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. So with like the younger kind of UK scene rising, we're also seeing, people in the class and age of Ghetts, Kano, Skepta, DEE, these guys who've been around since like the early 2000s start to make a resurgence. And I would argue that like Kano probably put one of my favorite Kano albums out with Hoodies All Summer in 2019.
Great album.
This Ghetts album, is quickly up there for me in terms of Ghetts' discography. And I think we're seeing maybe something kind of happen similarly in the United States too, with artists like Freddie Gibbs, who's 38 years old, first Grammy nomination, and he's definitely crossing over into the mainstream in a major way. Griselda, all those guys are up there in age. Do you think we're seeing something shift here with rappers aging out? And maybe that not being so much of a reality anymore and people being more open to listening to older rappers?
Yeah, I think there's a line with it though. Like Busta Rhymes dropped his album. It was okay. No one really cared. Some people cared. No one really cared. But then, I mean, it also depends on how old. Like, I don't know. Like, you start getting into like what is the perception of age. I definitely think over 35 is old from a musical standpoint. So, I mean, I think there is a better idea of allowing, artists to actually age in the industry. I think Freddie Gibbs is really good at choosing collaborators. He makes really, really, really fucking good music, although his lyrics are often about the same type of things. I mean, his work with Madlib and shit like that, and Alchemist, like, it just sounds really, really, really good to listen. They're really good albums. So I think if you can put out the music at a high level, then sure. But I feel like that the British have always had a little bit more respect for their elder statesmen than the Americans have, because the Americans, like, just from an overall music standpoint, like, I mean, like, there are untouchable artists in the whole scope of British music. I mean, like, if you're a Beatle, a member of the Smiths, a member of Radiohead, or David Bowie, then, like, you kind of get a free pass, and like the tabloids can say whatever, but that music is rooted in English culture. And I think this era of UK hip-hop is becoming now rooted in English culture. It is having the same standing as, or better standing than, rock music counterparts. So I think what you're getting is another like royal family of UK hip-hop that's coming out. That's Kano, that's Skepta, you know what I mean? That's Dave, you know what I mean? Like, so I believe that the UK are a little bit more with it with that, whereas it's very dog eat dog, the American hip hop scene. But I think, as you're saying, it's changing, because like at the end of the day, the music that's coming out, like, how can you deny Griselda? You know what I mean? Just because they're getting older, like, listen to the music they make. Listen to what Benny the Butcher does. You know, like Conway the Machine, like, listen to what they do. And you're just good. You can't just omit that. You can't age out that music. I think it's really hard to not age out because of just the nature of it. But I think you're totally right with that. I think that, and it should be like that. You should, like, artists should be able to grow within the industry. The key is that the onus is then on the artist to be putting out music like Benny the Butcher, Freddie Gibbs. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Would you say, like, in rap, like, did you feel like the Wu-Tang Clan, past a certain age, kind of got dismissed or ushered out of rap music?
I also think that rappers try to get out of rap music a lot. So, like, Riz has been doing other stuff. He's been acting and, doing films, trying to produce films and all this kind of stuff. So it depends on whether or not, like, I don't know, it's a chicken before the egg kind of thing. Like, are they trying to get out of hip hop ahead of them being aged out, or are they aging out and then deciding because of that to go into other things? And then also the association artists have with the struggle and being in the streets, do they see that as a continuation? So, like, is the music being a continuation of the struggles of their youth? That's the question. And they want to get away from that by doing whatever, starting businesses, which is completely understandable. So, I mean, there's a lot of different variables that are kind of put into that. With the Wu-Tang Clan, I mean, there's certain bands where you get a gangster for life pass being in them. Wu-Tang Clan is one of them, and NWA would be another one as well. But I think the problem is also Wu-Tang Clan's later records aren't that good. That's a problem. Like the last Wu-Tang Clan album that came out a few years ago was not good. So it's hard to stay relevant when it's not that good. I also think the Wu-Tang Clan business model is probably not for today's hip hop, if that, but so, I mean, I think there's a number of reasons. Also, like the way hip hop is devoured now and the way it sounds is completely different from the way it is today. And like Ghostface Killah is awesome. Method Man is awesome. Raekwon is awesome. Jizza is awesome, but their records don't align with the music of today. And I think that becomes a problem for younger people absorbing their music. It sounds too different is a big problem. Whereas I think someone could throw on The Chronic and it's a little bit, I mean, there's some through lines.
People kind of see rap as that, and I think rap is very often, ushered into that lane or seen as not an art form in that way. So I think as times kind of change and people are kind of seeing rap more for the art it is, we're going to continue to get albums like Hoodies All Summer and like Alfredo and like Conflict of Interest.
If you can if you can put out music like those 3 albums, Alfredo is probably going to win a Grammy tomorrow. This Conflict of Interest is absolutely fucking fantastic. And Hoodies All Summer, like, it's really good. He didn't put out shit like later on in life. So it's a combination. Also, I think that the grime influence sound, because it's rooted in electronic music, it has more staying power, for what hip hop sounds like today. I listen to older stuff around my little cousins, and they're like, what the fuck is this? Like we were testing out my Uncle Dave's system, and who spends an exorbitant amount on system, actually invested extra money to make sure his speaker components were piano black. Incredible. So they put on sicko mode to test it out. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to throw on Ghetto Bird by Ice Cube, which is going to nuke the bass in that, because that is a fucking bassy ass song. And they're like, what the fuck is this? And like me and my aunt are like grooving to it because we're roughly the same age, but the younger kids it doesn't translate to them. It sounds like old music to them.
Yeah, no, I think that's the really interesting point too, in terms of like, because I think after listening to this album, I went back and also after listening to Tyrann by Slope Tie, I was listening to Dizzy Rascal's Boy in the Corner from 2003, and that album still sounds super futuristic because it's a really pure grime album. And it's completely the same blueprint. So like when I'm hearing elements of that album in Tyrann and Conflict of Interest, they still sound modern and to this day. So I think that's a really interesting point in terms of the electronica and also making sounds that are, futuristic and, forward-thinking sonics. So to wrap up Conflict of Interest, what do you think you would give it on the COG rating?
I love it. It's an 8.5. It's incredible. I thought it was really, really, really good. I thought I enjoyed it. There are just a couple little spots there where I'm like, nah. But overall, it's an incredible album, and I think everyone should listen to it. And if you want to hear it's interesting because he's an older artist, but if you want to hear where UK hip hop is right now, you can listen to it, which is like, that is the big thing with, aging out, is that can that sound be translated into what's now? And this absolutely can. So that's pretty fucking good. Yeah, you're going to see some younger kids in England bang this too.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And I think this is an album that, like Hoodies All Summer, is going to stay in my rotation. And I really appreciate when artists kind of take the extra time and energy into crafting music, and it sounds like a body of work. And this is definitely something I'm going to be returning to. So I think for me, I will give this 9 cogs, and I will definitely be, listening to this album in some variation all summer. So Kyle, I want to say thank you for joining me today.
Absolutely.
Look forward to doing this again with you very, very soon. Everyone, Thank you for listening. Make sure to rate us, review, subscribe, and we'll join you on the next episode of the Rhythm Section.